Welcome to today's presentation on plant-centric eating and immune health. I'm Linda Illingworth, and I'm your host today. And today is Earth Day, so I think it's really important that we're talking about plants and everything that Mother Nature has for us in her arsenal. So why do I call it plant-centric? And the reason I'm calling it plant-centric rather than plant-based is because I feel like plant-centric is a little more inclusive, and I feel like it's less intimidating than to think of a plant-based, 100% plant-based diet, which is how a lot of people refer to plant-based eating. And plant-centric allows my omnivores to be thinking about how to center their meals around plants and yet not feel like, you know, they're have to make that an exclusive choice. So, so that's why I use the term plant-centric, which might sound a little unique to you. Whoops, let me see, turn here. Okay, so why plants? So there's lots of reasons for us to be including more plants in our diet, and the strong immune effects are really one of the main reasons. And plants interact with our immune system in multiple ways: through fiber, which nourishes gut bacteria, through vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, and a whole compound classification of compounds called phytochemicals or phytonutrients. A lot of antioxidants are also these things, but there's a lot of them that really maybe aren't as seen as nutritional, but then have effects on the immune system. So plants produce these compounds as a way to protect themselves primarily from the environment, from insects that would eat them, and weeds, noxious weeds that would overtake them. And then when we eat them as humans, we get the benefits of those same things that protect the plants. They really interact with our immune system or provide other nutrients to, like, for example, fiber to nourish our gut bacteria. Second, I need to move something off the screen so I can see here. Okay. So I love this video about the immune system because the immune system seems so kind of innocuous. Like, where is it? Where's it hanging out? What is it actually doing? So I'm going to share this with you. If you can't see the video, or can't hear the video, you should be able to see it. If you can't hear it, don't worry about that too much. You're going to see the immune system in action. And what I've written on the right-hand side are kind of the key points about what's actually going on. Now, the first two cells they talk about are immune cells, but not the ones we're necessarily talking about. We're going to be macrophages, as you're going to see. They're going to mention macrophages, and those are the ones that really are doing these things on the right-hand side. So I'll play this for you.
Eosinophils and basophils, by comparison, are the least abundant immune cells, making up around 1% of them. Eosinophils usually deal with parasitic infections, and basophils are responsible for allergic responses as they release histamines causing inflammation. The sole purpose of monocyte cells is to differentiate into macrophages and dendritic cells. Dendritic cells are known as antigen-presenting cells, or APCs. An antigen is a molecule recognized by the immune system. Using special receptors located on the cell's surface, the dendritic cell translates the protein code of the pathogen and takes this information back to the T and B cells located in the lymph node. Dendritic cells are also phagocytes and are capable of attacking cells in our body that have become cancerous. This video shows a dendritic cell interacting with melanoma tumor cells. Macrophages are the largest of the immune cells and are pathogen-digesting champions. Using phagocytosis, they are able to completely engulf a pathogen into its phagosome, fusing with the lysosome, forming a special organelle called the phagolysosome. The pathogen is then digested with a combination of enzymes and toxic peroxides. Macrophages are also capable of reaching out and grabbing a pathogen with tentacle-like extensions of their cellular membrane. If there is an overwhelming amount of pathogens, macrophages release a communication protein molecule called cytokines. This calls for backup to other immune cells, which initiates an immune response.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I enjoy watching that. And a couple of things that might have seemed familiar to you was if you've seen the COVID-19 virus and all those little spikes on it, those spikes match up with the virus as you saw that the dendritic cell did to extract that information, and so that that immune cell can then learn to make antibodies to share with the rest of the body to fight off infection. So that is a kind of an artist's rendition of what we're trying to work on right now as far as developing a vaccine and or using people who have already had COVID-19 and taking their antibodies and giving them to others. So I just think it's a really interesting way to visualize and get to see your immune system and what's really happening there. And so plants contribute to this process by stimulating macrophages. They can actually drive that process. They can mark pathogens also, so that these dendritic cells can find them. So it's almost like putting like a stain or a highlighter on them. And they also then act as like cofactors, for the example of vitamin C that drives the reaction. So, so lots of ways that plants help the immune system. So when we are looking at the health risks, so how does that translate then? A better immune system through plant nutrients. What are we really seeing? What's the real benefit here? And so what we see is that, sorry, I'm again struggling with things on my screen that I need to see. And you don't need to see. If I can get rid of this. Okay, so what we see is that higher disease risks or higher risk for cardiovascular disease, cancers, and diabetes in particular, and also hypertension with omnivore diets. So diets that include meat, fish, dairy, and eggs. And these are the things that we see that we don't typically see in a more plant-centered or a 100% plant-based diet. And that would be TMAO production from animal proteins. And that is something that's made in the gut from choline and L-carnitine that are in animal flesh. Cholesterol, there's no cholesterol in plant foods. Higher intake of heavy metals, which is a little bit surprising as well. But you have to think of, as we eat up the food chain, much the way the larger predatory fish have more mercury, same happens with our animal proteins too. Lipotoxicity of saturated fat, and what that is referring to is the saturated fat's ability to contribute to obesity and insulin response, and an inappropriate insulin response. Trans fats, heterocyclamines are found in the browning of meats or the charring of meats, the stuff that a lot of us think tastes really good in meat, and maybe one of the caramelizations of meat that we really like that creates a really delicious flavor. Industrial toxins again, and we see higher BMI in omnivores. Now I asterisk this because this could be for multiple reasons. It could be that little bit of extra protein in the diets creates more muscle mass, but generally we also see more overweight and obesity as well. So I just put an asterisk there because BMI can be a little bit deceiving. Interestingly, we see 7 nutrients of concern with omnivores, and that's fiber, omega-3, the phytonutrients or antioxidants, magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin E, and folate. And when we move to vegetarians and vegans, we only see typically 3 nutrients of concern, which is interesting. Because you would think as you cut out parts of the diet or typical dietary intake that you might see fewer nutrients provided, but we kind of see the opposite happen because then we're bumping up plant sources of our food intake that are providing these other nutrients. So when we step into a vegetarian or more plant-centric eating type of pattern, so you might be a pescatarian or include eggs and dairy, we do see typically the research is showing us better moods, better blood sugar, less uric acid. Interestingly, vegetarians tend to consume about half the amount of sodium of omnivores. Now that part of that, it could be cured meats, things like salami and lunch meats and things that are not being consumed typically on a vegetarian diet, and or also higher use of salt because meats are bland and more savory and need a little salt to for more flavor. could be lots of reasons. This particular research study did not say why, just the quantity that was consumed. We do see equal bone health, which I think is very interesting because we've been told for a long time that dairy products are the perfect food and we need them for calcium. But the truth is that calcium is well supplied in the plant kingdom. So eating plants can provide just as good a bone health. And we do see that slightly lower BMI. Now, as we shift to vegan dietary pattern, we see, again, all the same benefits of the vegetarian diet there. And but we see less risk of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, and cancers yet, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. So this research study was from the Adventist mortality study. And what they used was non-vegetarians, or look at this first line here as omnivores, as our control group. And having just the basic, that's our basic risk line. And then seeing as we add more plant matter to our diets and less animal protein, how does that affect disease risk? So if we come down to a semi-vegetarian, and that might describe a lot of us, that we are eating a lot of plant foods, but we're still eating some chicken or fish and some meat here and there, we see these reductions in diabetes and hypertension. We see about a 30% reduction. As we move to a semi-vegetarian, as a pesca-vegetarian, then we see about a 50% reduction in diabetes and about a 40% reduction in hypertension. Moving to lacto-ovo, we see a further reduction yet. And as we move down to veganism at the very bottom line, we see a 75% decrease of risk for hypertension. And again, some of that could be related to the sodium intake, but also to those phytonutrients that are helping to provide compounds like nitric oxide, which relax the blood vessel and naturally contribute to lowering blood pressure. So I find this very, very interesting and very powerful evidence about how plants can really help promote our health overall. And ultimately, what this is showing us is the immune system in action, because inflammation is directly related to the immune system. And in diabetes and hypertension and cardiovascular disease, what we're seeing is inflammation that is driving those disease states. Plant matter, plant nutrients help neutralize that inflammation. Also, I found this research this past year, which I found super interesting, on mood and plants. And there's actually quite a bit of research on this. And there's a strong association between optimism and serum antioxidants. So in this first study, what they found was that for every standard deviation increase in reported optimism, we saw 3 to 13% increase in serum carotenoids. Now, carotenoids are found in the orange-colored flesh of fruits and vegetables, and we're going to get to those sources in a little bit. The other study saying that many apples keep the blues away, you actually don't have to eat this much. This showed that 7 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables a day not only improved your mood the day you eat them, but also the next day. And so there's this residual benefit of mood boosting and optimism by eating more plants. And it's interesting because if you start talking to people who eat, say a salad every day, if they don't get it, they start to miss it or will crave it. Or you might go on vacation and feel like, gosh, I just can't wait to get home and get back to some, healthy vegetables. You just feel better. And this could be partially the contribution to mood and how you feel. So most of the studies don't say 7 to 8 servings. Most of the studies say 4 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables will get it done. But if you move to a more plant-centric way of eating, you'll easily hit 7 to 8 servings, because 1 serving of vegetable is a half a cup cooked or 1 cup raw. So if you eat a main dish salad, you're probably going to have 4 cups of lettuce on that plate, and that's 4 servings right there before you throw in any cucumber, tomato, or carrots or anything else you're going to add to it. So it's easier to get that 7 to 8 than you think. So fiber's main contribution is that, well, not main, but one of the important ones is that it feeds the gut bacteria. So the healthy bacteria that live in our intestinal tract is our first line of immune defense, because they are responsible for identifying bacteria and viruses and other pathogens that just don't belong and trying to neutralize them and get the body rid of them. So by feeding those healthy gut bacteria, then they're able to do their job more efficiently. And they eat fiber to survive. So if you aren't eating enough fiber in your diet, then you aren't really promoting healthy gut bacteria to the degree that you could. Eating more plants, eating a plant-centered diet really provides those fibers, and then you just don't have to really think about it so much. Fiber also creates bulk in the intestines, and that stimulates contractions in the intestines, and that moves things through at a regulated rate. That means things don't get stuck in there, so you aren't absorbing more heavy metals, and you aren't absorbing more toxins, and aren't overexposed to viruses and bacteria as well. So it keeps things moving through at a proper rate. And fiber regulates body functions like blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar. And those each could be an entire Zoom meeting lecture on their own. So I won't go into those, but you can easily say in the Google search bar, fibers effect on blood pressure, and you're going to get a whole host of information on exactly how it's done. Or you can just email me and I can help you with that. The antioxidants in plant foods regulate the immune system. They can both calm the immune system by reducing inflammation, but they can also stimulate responses. So remember how I said that some of the antioxidants can actually stimulate those dendritic cell functions. So in the case of, for example, just to go back again to the current situation of COVID-19, you may have heard that some patients have this overstimulated immune system where the immune system kind of starts to attack itself. So it doesn't have the balance going on. And what they have found that there might be some plant compounds that they're studying that help balance the immune system so that we aren't as overreactive. So that's one of the reasons why we want you to get a variety of antioxidants, so you're actually providing things on both sides of the immune system to balance. Antioxidants neutralize things called free radicals. Now, free radicals are unstable molecules that will disrupt DNA, will damage DNA in replication, and damage cells. And so antioxidants help cells mount a response through their genetic expression to either stop the errant DNA replication caused by free radicals and then cause that cell to die, which is called apoptosis. And the beauty of free antioxidants is that most of them maintain their own integrity as they go through this process. They don't destroy themselves. So they can be recycled over and over. But they also often need new plant materials, new plant contributions in the nutrients to be recycled. But the fact is that they can be used over and over, and that's a very efficient way of helping the immune system as well. So how do you get all these antioxidants or these phytonutrients? So a lot of us use the term eating the rainbow. So antioxidants actually contain or actually have specific colors, and some antioxidant colors are covered up by others. But generally, this slide tells you where you can find these major classes of antioxidants, and there are different types of glucosinates. Now that's the broccoli family. That's everything in the crucifers or brassica family, and that's cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale, rutabaga, all of the cabbages, and trying to think if I missed anybody, but basically all of that family. And they, again, participate in that cell cycle arrest, meaning they can stop errant DNA replication, that apoptosis, which is helping cells die that need to die, that aren't healthy, detoxification, inflammation, and maybe very important in prostate cancer and possibly breast cancer as well. Anthocyanins are the purple colors. You'll see those in eggplant, in grapes. Resveratrol is in that category. They're great for cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, and blood pressure. Lycopene and lutein found in tomatoes, and actually cooked tomatoes have a higher concentration of these compounds. So tomato sauces are great, but you can still eat them fresh as well. Cardiovascular and cognitive function from lycopene and lutein. The carotenoids are that orange color. Now, carotenoids are also in green vegetables. Orange carotenoids get covered up by the chlorophyll. So sometimes you're getting more than one compound in a fruit or vegetable. You actually usually are getting lots of compounds. And then we also have the flavonoids, and flavonoids are found in multiple fruits and vegetables. They're involved in cancer prevention, cognitive function, and cardiovascular disease prevention. Apples and oranges are great examples. Apples contain quercetin, which is a flavonoid, and in oranges, that white pithy part of the citrus fruit, that is a very high in flavonoids. So I always tell people, don't peel off all the white pithy part on the orange. Try to eat a little bit of it because you're also getting the flavonoids and not just the vitamin C and fiber and other nutrients that oranges are providing. I do want to point out on the prior slide that a great resource is listed here at the bottom, oregonstate.edu. This is the Linus Pauling Institute, and they have a plethora of nutrition information and is all evidence-based and a great, great resource for lay people and professionals alike. So here's just some nutrients that support the immune system. There are lots, but these are the ones that we typically hear most about. Potassium is a very potent anti-inflammatory, and if you're eating a plant-centric diet, you are getting a lot of potassium, so you don't need to worry about supplementing this. But if you aren't, and you're really more of an omnivore and not really getting those fruits and veggies in, then this is a great reason to start pushing more fruits and vegetables into your diet. And these are the places where we typically see the highest levels of potassium. Zinc, and we want you to eat potassium daily. Zinc, eating food sources of this 2 or 3 times a week, it's antiviral, antimicrobial, and it helps drive some of those immune responses. We see these in whole grains, nuts. Oysters are very high in zinc. So if you are following a more paleo or a keto type of diet, you might not be getting many whole grains. So we want you to be looking more toward the nuts, or maybe if you like oysters, eat those. And their zinc is in smaller amounts in other places. But if you aren't eating any of these foods, then maybe shoot me an email. We can troubleshoot how to get those. Selenium, once or twice a week, we want to be sure we're getting good sources of selenium. This recycles glutathione, and I refer to glutathione as Shrek. It's like glutathione is the largest antioxidant that the cell makes inside the cell. So this is different than antioxidants we eat that are coming from outside the cell. So I envision glutathione as Shrek inside the cell, kind of defending the castle of the cell. And glutathione can be recycled by antioxidants and like selenium and minerals like selenium. So getting a good source of selenium at least a couple of times a week is great, because most of us aren't getting enough selenium in our diets unless we're eating more whole grains, and a lot of us have cut back on those. In a plant-centric diet, we don't have to worry about that carb load as much, because in a plant-centric diet, these are whole foods we're consuming and they are low glycemic. So if you're concerned about or have questions thinking, why is she recommending so many whole grains? Well, again, the more you move toward a plant-centric diet and decrease some of those animal proteins and are eating whole foods, then those whole grains become less and less of an issue. Brazil nuts are packed with selenium, and I believe we talked about this once before. They have so much selenium that I really don't want you to be eating handfuls of those every day, because selenium toxicity is a real thing. So once or twice a week, have a couple Brazil nuts, or you could have a Brazil nut every day, but Brazil nuts have way more selenium than the RDA. So again, just don't overdo Brazil nuts, but I do want you to eat them if you like them. Vitamin C, something we would like to have you eat daily. Again, vitamin C is something that can be recycled over and over. And we see it in citrus fruits, berries, melons, broccoli. As long as you don't cook the broccoli, vitamin C is destroyed by cooking. So just a really light cook on it would be good, or eating it raw. And then beta glucans is something that we don't talk a lot about. And beta glucans are found in mushrooms of all kinds, both the culinary and medicinal mushrooms. Now, by medicinal mushrooms, I'm not talking about psychedelic mushrooms. I'm talking about things like that we drink, like in mushroom tea, or the mushroom powders that you see added that have like lion's mane, shiitake, which is also a culinary mushroom, maitake, and all of these other medicinal mushrooms that have anti-cancer benefits and immune stimulating benefits. So the only thing I will say about the medicinal mushrooms in that category are that they are immune stimulating. And so for some of you with autoimmune disorders, go lightly on these, because these are the kinds of things that might ramp up your immune system. And in autoimmune disorders, we're really trying to work more on the anti-inflammatory side. But culinary mushrooms, portobellas, the baby bellas, the brown, the white cap mushrooms, enoki mushrooms, things like that. Not a worry. These are not particularly immune stimulating to the degree that the medicinal mushrooms are. All right, so how do you fill your plate? So on the right-hand side, this is my plate from the government, and I edited a little bit here. But what I want you to pay attention to here is that half of the plate is showing from fruits and vegetables. So if you just simply stack your plate half vegetable or half fruit and vegetable, then and then see you've got a quarter of the plate as grains, you've got 3/4 of that plate from plant food. I call that plant centric. Then we add protein. Now, the protein could still be plant centric. It could be beans, it could be legumes, nuts, anything, tofu, tempeh from that category. Then that's 100% plant based. But if you have chicken or fish or beef in that protein section, then you are still eating an omnivore type diet, but it plant centered. Does that make sense? Now, also the government actually has dairy on there. I would actually replace that with water or a dairy substitute. So if you choose, now you don't have to have dairy in your diet, like I said before. There's plenty of protein in other aspects of the food supply. And dairy substitutes, most of the almond milks and coconut milks have been fortified with calcium. They may not have as much vitamin D, but again, we can get vitamin D from other sources in the diet. So that's just one kind of simplified way of looking at it. On the left-hand side, I've put food actually on the plate so you can see the proportions. So we might have a 3 or 4 ounce portion of salmon there, and then we've got some salad or kale, some cooked vegetables, and about a half a cup to a cup of whole grain. So proportionally, how do we want to handle that whole grain piece? Again, a lot of you who are very active are not going to have to worry about adding too much starchy carb. But those of you who might be trying to lose some weight or maybe still having a little bit of blood sugar issues, then stacking it in this fashion where a quarter of the plate has the starchy component helps you get the calorie density down a little bit and can help with blood sugar regulation. Here's some other pictures of how it might look. So the one on the left here has obviously a bunch of vegetables. There looks like some couscous, maybe with some kale cooked in it, some roasted Brussels sprouts, and maybe a little roll up in the top left corner, and a few sweet potatoes. So that would be a very plant-centric meal there. Protein, again, could be coming from what I'm not sure if that's hummus or a piece of tortilla. Your best guess. But if it's a little scoop of hummus down there, that's giving us some protein. And again, protein is in vegetables and in grains, so it does add up. So sometimes just having some legumes built into there, the green beans are going to contribute a little bit of protein there too. So you don't really have to worry about it in a single meal per se. On the right-hand side, this is tabbouleh, and this is a great way to get a plant-based meal in because it's a nice mix of parsley or other greens that you like. It doesn't have to be parsley, you can put any type of green in it. Some legumes, there's some mushrooms in there, onions. It looks like there's a little bit of pomegranate in this one too. So just a nice grain salad with some legumes is a great way to do that. On this slide on the left is my actual dinner from last night. I've found a way to roast vegetables in salt, which sounds very unhealthy, but the way it's done is it's just in a bed of salt, and you basically brush all of the salt off of the vegetables when they're done, and it just makes these beautiful vegetables. I haven't added any oil, and you're using a large kosher salt, so it's easy to brush off, and then you can reuse that salt each time you want to roast a vegetable, which I think is pretty cool. So I have some sauteed celery here that I sauteed in olive oil and balsamic vinegar. These are 2 small slices off of a chicken breast and with an onion cream, which is fabulous. And if you want the recipe for the onion cream, let me know because it's absolutely amazing. You simply roast onions and then you put till they're nice and soft and really mellow, and then you blenderize them. And then you can use that like you would use cream in a dish. So it's a fabulous way to put in a plant-based, savory, creamy, rich ingredient that basically is very low calorie and has no cholesterol and no fat. On the right-hand side, this is an example of a main dish salad that I was talking about earlier. And there's like a scoop of tuna or salmon on there for maybe a pescatarian. So you can start to see how to stack your meals so you're getting a fair amount of plant matter. And in my potatoes on the left, those are purple and red potatoes. So in the skin of those potatoes, those red potatoes contain some of the anthocyanins I was talking about. The purple potatoes are loaded with anthocyanins. And in research studies on potato, is that the blue potatoes, those purple ones that are purple throughout, were shown to decrease inflammation after a meal. We saw fewer inflammatory markers. Red potatoes were inflammation neutral, and white potatoes drove up inflammation a little bit. But in a mixed meal where you have a lot of other plant matter, I'm less worried about a few white potatoes. Just try to eat the skin so you get a lot of great fiber, and they're a fabulous source of potassium, which is a great immune booster. So fermented foods are another great way to help the immune system, and primarily, fermented foods are from plant sources. So fermented foods provide probiotics, and they, again, are the first line of defense in the gut. So if we have these in our diets on a regular basis, doesn't mean you have to eat pickled foods every day or fermented foods every day, but working them into your diet 2 or 3 times a week is a great habit to get into. So they provide transient species. So when we say transient, what we mean is these are not permanent residents, but they are gut influencers. So I kind of compare them to social influencers on Instagram. They get on there with pretty pictures and clean it all up, and everyone feels good about themselves. And that's kind of what happens in the gut too. So we get these transient species that go in, they influence the less desirable bacteria to decrease their populations and enhance the populations of more desirable bacteria to give us better immune protection, better digestion, better gut motility, and things like that. So we get a natural fermentation from yeasts and bacteria that are on the surface of these fruits and vegetables or found in the air. And that's where those bacteria come from. So a lot of people, where do they even come from? How do you make a pickle? Well, a lot of it is just what's naturally on the fruits and vegetables. And if you are an organic gardener, and maintain healthy organic soil, even if you wash off all the dirt from your garden, you're still getting microscopic amounts of probiotic bacteria that way as well. So plant-based examples could be pickles, kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, or water kefir that can be made. You might have seen that in Trader Joe's has some of that. You can also buy the little kefir crystals and make your own at home if you're interested in that. And then animal sources of fermented foods would be things like yogurt and kefir. But if we're keeping it more plant-based, we would be looking more toward the sauerkrauts and kombuchas. Those are probably the more accessible things that you might toss on a sandwich, or even making your own homemade pickles. It's super easy. And as you can see in the picture, we've got things, everything from cucumbers to tomatoes in there. Garlic's a great thing to pickle. Carrots, I love pickled carrots, and onions are fabulous. So these are great to just throw on a salad that really dull up an otherwise plain and maybe boring lettuce salad. All right, so in summary, plant-based eating is really associated with the lowest health risks overall for heart disease, diabetes, cancers, and hypertension. And plants contain the nutrients that really facilitate good immune health from the gut out to the cells in the body. And we've seen that fruits and vegetables can improve moods and positivity. And what we know about that is that people with better attitudes, or the belief that they are healthier, tend to be healthier. So our attitudes very much affect our health and our immune systems. So I've also given you some resources here on the green bar on the side. These are sources for great recipes for plant-centric eating. Forks Over Knives is a fabulous resource for really learning more about some of the research behind plant-based eating. And if you want to just follow some of my wacky stuff that I eat, I post something several times a week, what I'm eating, just to kind of inspire you to incorporate more plants in your diet. And I'm nutrition_muse on Instagram. You can also always just email me directly at illingworth@sdsm.com. And with that, I'll wrap this up, and then we'll start the Q&A, and I will unmute everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
What's your 2 cents about probiotics?
That's a great question. Probiotics, again, if you can get them out of your food and fermented foods, I think that's enough for a lot of people. But many people do better with taking a probiotic supplement. And so I'm very much in the camp for that. And I think it's a really good idea right now to be taking that, especially through cold and flu season. So most people do well on a low dose probiotic. I like to see multiple species, somewhere between 6 and 10 or 12 different species on the label. They don't differ dramatically from one another. If you have a question about yours, you guys can just send me a picture of the label, and then I'm happy to take a look at it. But a low dose probiotic would be anything from, say, 1 to 5 billion CFUs, and that CFUs refers to the number of bacteria in the probiotic, and in each capsule. A higher dose would be something like 25, 50, or 100 billion. And most of you don't need the 100 billion CFU unless you have IBS or something else going on, and then that might be a good idea for you. And a lot of people feel much better taking that higher dose. You do have about 2 pounds of gut bacteria that naturally live in our GI tracts. And so that tiny little capsule, even of 100 billion, you can see is just this little influencer that can really clean things up and improve your gut health if you need that. And right now, again, I think it's a great idea to take one, at least a low dose, as, again, helping your first line of defense while we're getting through the rest of this cold and flu season.
Thank you. And a follow-up question to that, will you put on the next Life Wellness newsletter, will you put some of this information that you've given us in that, and as well as your onion cream recipe and your own little blog?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was great information for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I was hoping it would help.
Yep.
Good. Anyone else have a question?
Yes, Linda, hey, it's Ann. I was a little bit confused about the discussion about the mushrooms, medicinal versus the other, and the potentially harmful effects on autoimmune issues, et cetera. Could you expound on that just a little bit?
Yes. And so the culinary mushrooms are great carriers of a vitamin D precursor. They have fibers and some other nutrients that are immune supportive, but they don't drive the immune system to the degree that the medicinal mushrooms do. So the medicinal mushrooms you'll find in the extracts or the mushroom teas that are very popular right now. I'm drawing a blank right now but lion's mane is a big one. Maitake, pardon me?
Force somatics.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Force, oh yes, thank you. I see Linda's got the label there. And Susie remembered what it was, thank you. I was having a brain fart. Yeah, so Four Sigmatic is a company that puts together these medicinal mushrooms, and there are other companies that have extracts. You might take them in a dropper form, and many people have found them to be extremely supportive for their immune health. They feel like they've been much healthier taking them. But there's a small segment of people that have autoimmune disorders, and even people with autoimmune disorder might feel a lot better. But remember, there's so many genetic variants from person to person on these little tweaks about how you respond to certain nutrients, that the medicinal mushrooms for some people can drive up inflammation, and you may not feel as well on higher doses of them. So I always just say start low and slow. I don't care what supplement you're taking, is that I always ask you to start with one. And even if I want you to take 3 a day, I'll still say start with one for a few days, then add the second one, and then add the next one, but go slow and slow. And just so you can sort out if you're having any reactions. So autoimmune disorders are kind of in this different category of, you never know who's going to react and who won't.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Good question.
Linda?
Yes.
When I saw you last year, you were hesitant about eating fish more than 2 or 3 times a week due to the mercury. Is that still holding?
Yes, it holds for our high mercury in particular. So shark and swordfish, I really don't want you eating those at all. Maybe once a year, on your birthday or something special, because they're very high in mercury. Tuna we feel is safe once a week, possibly twice a week. Again, it just depends on how, your gut health, gut transit, where that tuna, if it's a small tuna or if it's a large tuna that contains more mercury. The rest of the seafood, really, I think we need to be looking at the Safe Seafood app, leaning more toward the less predatory fish, things that are smaller. We know things like sardines and anchovies are very safe. The smaller the fish, the lower it is on the food chain and the less toxic metals and mercury and things it will have in it. So I have some people eating fish 4 and 5 times a week and even daily, but they really need to be including things like cod and maybe like tilapia or things that are not, definitely are not in the mercury category. But if you really lean toward a lot of poke, a lot of sushi, then I want you to stay in the salmon and stay out of the tuna so much and really be paying attention to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anything else?
Hey, Linda, where are you with zinc? I read a couple studies with the COVID stuff that shows potential beneficial impacts of zinc doses now.
Absolutely. I'm big on zinc. So zinc is tricky though, because zinc will compete with copper for absorption, and we can mess up your copper balance in the body pretty quickly with high doses of zinc. So I like to keep people around the 15 milligram mark on zinc if you're going to take it daily.
Okay.
And then just including, you know, foods that are high in zinc. But I don't think it's a bad idea to take zinc. Some of the studies I've read on things like shingles and other viral type, you know, infections respond very well to taking zinc right at the get-go. So I think it's a great tool to keep in your arsenal of things. Like if you're going to keep vitamin C around, keep some zinc around. As soon as you start feeling sick, if you take it, we do see that you can recover more quickly. And especially if you feel like your immune system is substandard, or you're, you know, certain times of the year, we're just working harder and it's harder for our bodies to recover. And so taking a little extra zinc is not a bad idea. Yeah, and it definitely, we think that zinc and also potassium are big players with COVID because of that ACE receptor, which relates to blood pressure. So interestingly, I wanted to mention is that plants help regulate blood pressure through that same ACE receptor that COVID is getting into the body on. And so a lot of the plant compounds may be found beneficial because of its interaction on that same receptor site and be able to block it so that viruses can't get in that way. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, in the year ahead, what we've learned more about some of these plant compounds against COVID-19 in particular. Yeah.
And Linda's also very fun to follow on Instagram when you see her try to do push-ups with her dogs, by the way, so.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I couldn't get anyone else to post a picture of even a one anything. Come on, you guys got to join me in the goofy stuff. We have to entertain each other. I can't be responsible for all the goofy stuff. Anyone else have a question? Everyone's doing well?
Mhm.
Yeah. How do you do incorporating? Do you feel like you're getting enough plants into your diet, or is anyone struggling with that?
I have a question, Linda. It's Lynn, and it's not about plant, but what do you think about CBD oil? I know that's a loaded question, probably.
That was a loaded question. You know, CBD, I don't know enough about it. Let's start there. I'm definitely not an expert in it. I've attended a couple of conferences where I've heard some researchers who are working with post-traumatic experiences and trauma experiences and sleep issues in veterans. And they have reported finding it helpful. However, it seems to be a bit of an art form, and that you, again, start low and work up. You don't just layer on a bunch. And there is one big issue with it, is that it can interfere with sleep. And again, I just don't know that we really understand how to make recommendations, you know, that aren't very, very individualized. Where I think that maybe it's more beneficial is as a topical for pain relief. I've had so many people tell me that feel like they've benefited from particular CBD creams that they'll put on an elbow or a wrist or, you know, some kind of an ailment. And I feel like that's safe And that's not going to necessarily interfere with your sleep because you just don't absorb as much, subcutaneously. And you would need certain carriers to get it through the skin and into the bloodstream that way, as opposed to taking it orally. So I really can't advise on taking it orally. I just don't know enough about it. I think it's interesting for sure, and I want to learn more. But I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
Oh, it's
as
good.
far as an immune booster, I can't really speak to that piece.
Okay.
Anyone else? Doing good. I know I see a lot of my plant eaters here. I had some really good response from some of our vegan friends that were really excited to hear about this. So I do encourage you guys to keep it up, and I'm happy to share that onion cream recipe. It's actually off of Food 52. If you haven't followed that website, they have some really interesting, a fun little shop you could lose your mind in for kitchen things, and also some really great recipe references for like one pot meals and this onion cream, which really was worth the extra effort.
Linda, can we have access to your presentation?
Yes, I'm recording it. I'm going to edit it, and I'll probably then email it out to you tomorrow. What I would ask you to do is, I think I can see everyone who clicked on the link for the access, but in the event I can't, if you just shoot me a quick email and say, send me the video, just so I'm sure that I get you in there, I'd really appreciate that. All right. Well, if that's it, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. And next week, hopefully we'll be back again with another Zoom, maybe more from Dr. Sheffit. So just really looking forward to connecting with all of you in person when all this is over.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
All right. My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Linda.